Welcome to Sgwrs, the Estyn podcast, and for this episode we're going to be talking about improvement journeys, in particular how schools navigate their way out of follow-up. My name is Steve Pringle, I'm an HMI with Estyn, and I'll let my two guests introduce themselves.
My name's Craig George, I'm head teacher at David Primary School and now executive head teacher of Crumlin High Level Primary School as well. I originally arrived at Crumlin High Level in October 2022, shortly before the core inspection, and as a result of the core inspection, Crumlin went into special measures, and I've been supporting them as executive head teacher ever since.
I'm David Haynes. I'm the head teacher at Ysgol Greenhill, serving the town of Tenby. I was the head teacher of Ysgol Penrhyn Dewi up until September 2021, when I arrived at Greenhill, which was in special measures at the time and had been in special measures for a number of years.
Right. Thank you both. So just to clarify for people, there are two levels of follow-up in Estyn. You can be placed in significant improvement if the school has a number of shortcomings and if there are concerns around the school's ability to make the necessary improvements, they can be placed into special measures. Now, neither of you were head teachers or substantive head teachers when the schools you were leading were placed into special measures. So can you tell us a little bit about what it was like when you arrived and how you worked with staff to take things forward?
Okay, I started in September 2021 in an interim capacity. I was the head teacher of Ysgol Penrhyn Dewi VA, as I've said, in St David's. I think during the first few inset days arriving at the school, I think it was about having those honest conversations with all stakeholders, including the staff, the leadership team and the governors at the time, to say, look, probably we need a bit of a cultural shift here in terms of a refocus on the recommendations which were set out several years previously in going back to the core inspection. And it was about winning those hearts and minds and being very honest and having those honest conversations about what the real focus was, because you can be distracted as a school into things that don't have as much impact on pupil progress and the improvement journey of the school. So it was about breaking things down and focusing on things that needed to be improved rapidly, really, at that point.
And you, Craig?
So slightly different experience for myself. I arrived literally a couple of days before the core inspection. I think it was actually 2 or 3 days for the core inspection. So when I got to Crumlin, I met with the leadership team that were there. There were a few issues, but obviously the inspection was coming, so it was just a matter of waiting to see what the outcome of the inspection would be. Initially, it went into significant improvement, but then when it was reviewed in Estyn, it went into special measures. And for me at that point, then, it was about staff morale. It was about getting their morale back up. They were on the floor, basically. They felt they were working really hard, and they were working really hard, just on the wrong things. And they just needed some guidance, really, some leadership to say, this is what we're going to work on. Trust me, we will get out of it. It's about those honest conversations that we mentioned there. And they're hard to begin with. Those honest conversations are quite hard because staff felt they were doing the right thing. Clearly they weren't. And it was just about getting that morale back up and saying, right, we're on a journey together. We will get there. Let's just focus on the right things.
When a school is in special measures, Estyn come and we monitor the school every term, normally a small team of inspectors. Certainly in the secondary sector, it's normally 3 people. What was your experience of the early monitoring visits and how you worked with Estyn?
For me, going back a stage, if I can, back to the PIAP, obviously we did the PIAP, the Post-Inspection Action Plan, and then the inspection team came in and looked at the Post-Inspection Action Plan with us and basically said, you've got too much in there. You're a small school, Crumlin's a small school of 5 teachers, and we'd put an awful lot in. We wanted to try and address, there were 5 recommendations, we wanted to try and address all 5 recommendations at once, and in fairness, the Estyn team that came in said, no. You can't do that. Focus on one thing at a time, and you'll get out of special measures much quicker. So we did. We literally stripped the PIAP, Post-Inspection Action Plan, right back. Worked very closely with our colleagues in Estyn, and it worked really well. I think that was a real good starting point. And then the monitoring visits, I've got to be honest, were fantastic. From a supportive point of view, it was really good to know that we were putting things in place. We felt they were working. Then colleagues from Estyn were coming in and saying, "Yep, you're on the right. You're in the right process. The journey's right, you're going the right way, keep working like this and you will get out of the category quite soon."
Again, a very similar experience to yours. Doing too many things at Greenhill, stripping things back to the main priorities with leaders focusing on largely improving the quality of teaching and learning, which would then have a positive impact on the progressive development of skills, I think, that the children could demonstrate. I think it was getting those things right first of all. Also, there were silos of good practice in the school, and it was about harnessing those, especially on middle leaders, and a real focus on professional learning. When Estyn came in for their first monitoring visit in November, it was really reassuring to have that validation that we were on the right path. However, an awful long way to go at that point as well, and to have that team of experts coming in to look at the work that we've been doing since the start of the term, and to give our middle leaders and our teachers the reassurance, yes, we're now on the right track, was vital, really, and also rewarding. It felt a true partnership. I think that everyone was focused on school improvement for the benefit of the children, which is why the schools exist. And
well, it's what we're all in different jobs for the same purpose, aren't we? We want young people to succeed, so we're all on the same side, really.
Exactly.
Yeah. I think you used a keyword there. It was a partnership. It felt like a partnership. It didn't feel like we were being done to. No. It felt like we were really working in close collaboration, in partnership. And as you said, that reward for staff, Estyn coming in, doing that review, and it was that reward for staff that, you've worked really hard, you are making the right progress, this is what we need to be doing. I think that was key for our staff and to boost our morale.
Yeah, and that provided extra momentum then to move on to the next stage of development. But taking your point in terms of doing less, and when you're in a category like special measures, doing less is more, really, and doing things well and consistently, and having that validation from Estyn. No, you don't. No, you're right. You don't have to do all these things. Let's get these few things done well and get the foundations right within the classroom, so that the children can make the progress they need through their attitudes to learning and the development of their skills, really. So,
and I think it's important that everything is focused on school improvement and not preparing for the monitoring visits. I think some schools fall into the trap of thinking there are specific things that inspectors come in and look for, and that's not really the case. All we're interested in is, are pupils making progress? Are they engaged in their learning? And we're all after the same thing. There's nothing, there's no hoops to jump through for Estyn, if you see what I mean. You've both mentioned the process being supportive, which is obviously good to hear from an Estyn point of view. What were the specific bits of the process that you found particularly helpful in supporting school improvement?
I think the conversations that Estyn were having with middle leaders about the processes that were taking place in the school, looking at work scrutiny was also really vital. Again, going back to your previous point there, Steve, that I think staff were, prior to my arrival, focusing on what do Estyn want to see? Can we prove to Estyn that we're doing the right thing? As opposed to focusing on the right stuff, which was children making progress in lessons and in their learning, and for the children to be able to articulate to Estyn and to the leadership team and to the middle leaders, look, we are making progress, we know we're making progress, and this is how and why we know. I think that was the key to it, really, is about improving as opposed to proving things in tick box exercises, which you can be drawn into when you're in that in that category.
For me, it was the honest conversations. And it's all about being honest with Estyn. It's not trying to hide things. You've got to be honest, And Estyn very honest with us and very honest with the staff as well. And for me, having a regular team who came back to do the reviews, those same people coming back, and they were able to see that progress for themselves and see the progress we were making. And again, that reward for the staff just to say, yeah, you are making the progress, but also for the pupils and the wider community, the parents and other stakeholders as well, to see that actually what we're doing is working. We had support from Estyn, from the local authority, from the consortium. And it was that reward for everyone to say, yeah, everyone's working really hard here. They're all working really well together. But from an Estyn point of view, like I said, having those open, honest conversations when people are coming back in, this is where we are. This is what we've done well. This still isn't working very well. We still need support with that. And I think from a professional learning point of view, for myself and for the staff, being able to sit with an Estyn inspector and say, right, we're not doing very well with this. Any advice you can offer us, or any way you've seen good practice taking place, we might be able to find a bit more support and things as well. So just about being honest and those open and honest conversations.
Okay. Obviously, being in follow-up it can be a time of great change for a school. Can you give me an example of something that during the follow-up process changed significantly in your school?
For me, it was a real focus on getting rid of the things that are not working. And in fairness to the school, like I said, the staff were working incredibly hard, just really on the wrong areas and the wrong things. And they just wanted some guidance on, right, okay, what do we need to focus on? What do we need to improve? We had 5 recommendations. One was teaching and learning. And we decided that that was one we really needed to hit. And again, in conversations with Estyn colleagues, hit that one because I would bring everything up. We had a recommendation on literacy and numeracy as well, but teaching and learning was a real one we wanted to focus on. And that's when we went really big on. We had support, like I said, from a local authority and the consortium. And I was able to bring in support from my other school as well, which worked quite well. What I would say there, though, as well, is there were good things happening in Crumlin as well. So I was able to take things from Crumlin back to Rooster David and vice versa. And again, like I said, with Estyn, we didn't want to feel it was being done to us. It was a supportive thing, and that was the same with both schools. I didn't want Crumlin feeling things were being done to them. I want them to come on the journey with me. It wasn't about me going in and saying, this is what we're going to do. It was about that discussion, right? This is what we need to do. How are we going to do it? And teaching and learning was the thing we focused on in our initial first term, and that really brought everything up really quickly. You know, we put a lot of professional learning in, brought some advisors in to support the staff, and the improvements, the progress was made really quickly in all areas then, because the teaching and learning was the focus was right.
Yes, a similar approach really. Teaching and learning wasn't right at the school. And I think teachers were trying to prove to Estyn that there were multiple examples of assessment and feedback. So peer assessment, self-assessment, the assessment process possibly could have lasted 2 weeks. The learning wasn't moving forward. So we stripped that back and let's get some learning and progress in that learning happening a bit more quickly, as opposed to proving to Estyn, look, we are doing all this assessment to prove that we're doing something. So that's one of the things that we adopted early, which enabled the learning to take place at a more rapid pace, really.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting you mentioned written feedback. We often find that schools trying to make improvement focus on written feedback to begin with. I think because it's quite an easy thing to get an overview of, and you get lots of evidence of it. But actually, from an Estyn point of view, we evaluate written feedback by how it helps learners to improve. And actually, if they haven't learnt enough in the lesson, then the written feedback is not going to help improve things, is it? So yeah, so it's interesting that I think you mentioned something about stripping back, David, before. That's a really important part, isn't it? Because schools often go into initiative overload.
That's a key point, I think, because very often a new initiative will come out and you think, oh, we have to adopt our initiative. You know, this is a buzzword, the buzz initiative, we have to adopt it. But if it doesn't work for your school, it doesn't work. And in Crumlin, I think, in fairness, like I said, they were working incredibly hard. The staff worked so hard there, but they'd taken on every new initiative that came out, and it wasn't impacting on teaching and learning. It wasn't impacting on the progress of the pupils. And it was just a case of going in and saying, this doesn't work. Let's get rid of all the things that don't work. Let's focus on the one or two things that really work. It's going to make the improvements for our pupils, and it's going to get us out of the category as quickly as possible. And that's what we did.
Yeah, again, numeracy was an issue at the school, and we probably spent an entire year looking at accuracy of children drawing and interpreting graphs in 4 carrier subjects, just to get that absolutely nailed down within the year. And that was good practice, because trying to shoehorn examples of numeracy into subjects where they had little purpose to prove to Estyn that we're doing numeracy was something that the staff probably thought they should be doing, when really they didn't believe it was the right thing to do. So it was, again, that's an example of something where we stripped things back just to get children to draw graphs accurately. I think it's one of those little myths about Estyn inspections out there that we expect to see numeracy delivered in every subject, and that's not the case. It's up to a school to decide which ones, but we certainly don't expect it to see in every one. Craig, you mentioned your teachers working very hard, and I think, David, I know that when you arrived, perhaps staff morale was quite low. The school had been in special measures for a fair amount of time. What did you do to work with your new staff to work on morale and staff well-being?
When I arrived, staff morale when they went to special measures was really low. There's not many staff in Crumlin, 5 teachers and 5 teaching assistants, and it was really important to build that morale up, and also try and get rid of the blame culture. This is somebody else's fault. It's no one else's fault. We're there. We're in that moment. The children get one chance in the school. We've got to make it the best it possibly can be for them. And I did a lot of work around that with them, really. Our children are fantastic in Crumlin. The behaviour, the well-being is superb, and that's credit to the staff that were there. They'd got all that right. They just needed to get the teaching and learning right, and they knew how to do it. And working with Estyn, once we got that PIAP right, the morale started to come up. I could really see that actually we're stripping things back. Our workload isn't as bad as we thought it was going to be. Those demands on us, our well-being is improving. And that was key, keeping the well-being under review for the staff to make sure they were okay. But like I said, as soon as they saw us start to strip things back, and it was a real focus on, right, we're just going to focus on this one thing. You need to improve that one thing. And they knew how to teach. They all know how to teach. It just needed that bit of self-belief and that self-confidence again. So once we started doing that, and once Estyn came in for that first review, the morale started to improve, you know, and it was then a case of, actually, you're doing a really good job. I'm going to start bringing some other people in to see what we're doing and giving staff that belief that actually we may change in literacy. Okay, we're going to get some literacy advisors then. They can have a look. But then they took what we did in literacy back to the little consortium as well. So then staff started to believe we're doing a good job. Morale came up and the progress was really good from there, really. But like I said, real focus on their well-being, checking in regularly just to make sure they're okay. And stripping things back. I know we keep saying about stripping things back, but that had the biggest impact. Taking the things that didn't matter and focus on those things that really mattered and just remind them that children get one chance, let's get it right for them.
Now, David, is more of a challenge, isn't it, in a large secondary school? You've obviously got a lot more than 5 staff.
It's about having those regular staff meetings as well. I think prior to my arrival, there would be a lot of departmental time and a lot of silo working. When I arrived, we brought the staff together every Monday night, essentially to share the vision and create the vision, and to bring people together and build those teams, those positive teams, being ultra positive at all times, that when we get out of special measures, when we become amongst the best schools in Wales in the next 5-6 years, being positive all the time, being visible around the school was absolutely essential. I think when you're in that situation, staff are looking to you and you have to be visible, positive around the school, positive with the parents, the children, challenging issues regularly, and it's creating that culture which often is needed then when a school is in special measures. Sometimes that cultural change. I think staff tend to retreat into their classrooms a little bit. They're looking for leadership, and at that point, leaders do exist within the school, great leaders, and they are still there today at Greenhill 5 years later. But it's about giving them a platform then as well to share their good practice. So it's about starting at the beginning with that vision and that shared vision, being visible, supportive, being in classrooms and supporting the staff, and then slowly bringing the other members of staff to the forum to share their good practice and building on that. And that's what creates the culture and ethos at the school then.
So something we adopted as well was a mantra of zero negativity. So something I borrowed from the SAS, but I read a book once called Zero Negativity, and we brought that in about not being negative, but being positive. Let's have smiles on our faces. Us as leaders set that culture. I'd walk around the school with a big smile on my face, so you do a fantastic job, keep going. Easier for me in a smaller school to call out the classes and say, doing a great job, keep it going. And that really brought the morale up as well. Yeah. And that's one that's carried on today, zero negativity in both schools, actually.
And also selling to the staff, look, especially at Greenhill, where the school had been in a category for several years, this isn't a negative badge to wear. Being in special measure, we can use this as a significant lever for change and positivity. And let's use this then with colleagues from Estyn who are going to visit us every month to add capacity to sense check where we are to move the school forward. It doesn't have to be a negative thing. It doesn't have to be doom and gloom. And I think as leaders of schools in a category such as that, I think you have to have that positive mindset, and that has to spread throughout the team. And eventually, as the Estyn monitoring visits roll on, the staff believe it as well, because they can see that the change is happening. And there's nothing better than having a positive monitoring review where there are areas of strength, but further areas to work on, and the staff can see the benefits of their work and feel rewarded by that. And the children are also benefiting greatly. So you're then in an upward spiral of improvement then, aren't you? You are getting some traction then on the work that you're doing.
And the biggest thing I say on that now is whenever I mention an interim visit from Estyn or inspection, staff smile. They look forward to it. Whereas before they'd be in this feeling of doom and gloom, now they smile and think, bring them in. And then see what we're doing now. They're happy to show the progress they've made and the journey they've been on.
Yeah, and you have to have confidence in the team and about being honest, isn't it? Honestly, where you are at a certain given point, and it can happen for whatever reasons, but you are where you are, and it's that honest realization of where we are, everyone recognizing where you are, but that there is an overwhelming sense to improve, and you focus on those right areas to get those incremental gains on a day-by-day, week-by-week basis.
Can I ask about your governing bodies? How did you engage them in the process, and how did they support you through the follow-up process?
To begin with, I need to do a lot of work with the governing body. The chair of governors was really good. He was fantastic, actually. But the governors kind of fallen apart over the years, I guess. They weren't really a strong governing body at that point. They hadn't really challenged the school. They hadn't been into the school much and challenged on self-evaluation. So it's really about explaining to them, look, you need to be in as well. You need to be in supporting the staff, but also challenging. You need to come in and looking at first-hand evidence, looking at books, listening to learners as well. So it took a little bit of time to work with them, and the local consortium did some work with our governing body for us as well, mainly around their role as governors and about questioning and things and supporting the school. So it took some time to get them on board and get them working. Like I said, chair of governors was fantastic. He was really engaged and really on board and really wanted to bring the governing body up. So we did a lot of work together about creating monitoring plans and calendars and things that would involve governors in the school more. They then started coming in and getting involved in we had governing body immersion days, where they would come into school for the full day. They would come in from breakfast club in the morning, stay right through, and then we'd have a governing body meeting in the evening. So they'd really get to see the true working of the school, get to do some learning walks, get to look at some books, get to listen to some pupils as well. And it kind of built from there, really, from that initial immersion day. They've been involved a lot more ever since, and they've been really strong. They've been really supportive. One thing I really liked with the governing body, once they got on board, was that real feeling of support for the staff and their well-being, because they recognise that being in the category is demoralising for them, and they want to make sure that the staff well-being was okay as well. So it did take a few months, to be honest, but once we got there, the governing body were then really supportive and really on board with everything, and they've gone from strength to strength themselves since.
I think a governing body can only be as good as the leadership team and the information that it gives the governing body. If a leadership team or a school has an overinflated view of itself or the work of the school and is giving that information to a governing body, well, how can they challenge or support? The mechanisms have to be set up for them to be able to have a true understanding of what's going on in the school. And those honest conversations with the governors at the start in 2020 to 2021 were difficult. So look, we are really at this position, everybody, and these are the things that we need to improve. And we probably needed at that point to set up smaller subcommittees looking at the different recommendations, so that honest conversations could be shared with where we currently were, what the actions had been, and what the impact of those actions had been on a regular basis. So I think that's what they appreciated, was having those that honest assessment of where we were. And I think the confidence then of the governing body will grow, and has grown at Ysgol Greenhill. They do offer, and they're very skilled now and are able to offer significant challenge. Do they always take our word on things that are happening at the school? Possibly, maybe not, but they want to be reassured that the leadership team is providing them with honest, reliable information, that they're able to visit the school, speak to children as well, and see that improvement journey. So governance is a very challenging role, as they are volunteers, and we're really grateful in Wales and in Ysgol Greenhill for having brilliant governors who are passionate about, again, the core business of the school, which is about the children, and the children maximising their potential and achieving what they're capable of doing. But they have to be in the light. The light has to be on in the room, and they have to know where the school currently is honestly and what the plans are. And they don't have to be complicated, simple steps. Look, this is where we are. These are the milestones. This is where we're going, and this is what good looks like. And they're then in a position then to offer some support and challenge.
Moving on to another important group of stakeholders, maintaining relationships with the local community when a school is in special measures can be quite a challenge. And, when an inspection team puts a school into special measures, we're always aware that that's a difficult thing to manage, the communication, the understanding of your local community. How did you go about, building those relationships up with the local community?
For me, I actually live in the local community. So in one way, it was a little bit more tricky, I guess, going to special measures. Parents, obviously, in Crumlin knew I'd only been in the school literally just before the inspection team came in. I guess they had that level of trust in me because they knew I was head of a school not far up the road, literally 5 minutes up the road. So they knew that Rooster David was doing well. Although I was challenged by parents when I first arrived. At an initial meeting, I came in and explained who I was. And one of the parents said to me, "How do you know you're going to be any good?" Which I thought was a very good question. Yeah. I said, well, we'll have to wait. Time will tell. We'll have to wait and see what happens. So initially, I was quite concerned going to special measures that we might lose some pupils. Only 112 pupils as it is. So, if we started losing pupils as well, then it would be quite difficult for the school. Actually, we bucked the trend. And I think it goes back to what you said earlier about the support coming into the school. It was about selling that journey to the parents, explaining, okay, yeah, we know where we are at the moment, but this is where we're going to get to. Estyn will be coming in and supporting us. The local authority will be supporting us. The local consortium will be supporting us. There's a lot of support coming into the school at the moment. And we really are going to go on a journey of improvement. And it's about selling that in, meetings with parents, regular communication through newsletters and CSO and other things that we use, just to make sure they had that belief in the school that actually they know what they're doing, they know where they're going. And then regular feedback to them then after Estyn had come in and reviewed the school, sharing that review with them to a certain extent and saying, okay, this is what we said we would do. Estyn have come in, they've quality assured where we think we are, they've agreed, and this is what we're doing next. So it was really about being open and honest, I guess. And we said honesty all along, really being honest with them. This is where we are, this is where we're going. And then just that clear line of communication and keeping that communication open with them.
Yeah, similar thing, really. The first thing that we did with parents was to call a stakeholder meeting in the hall, invited all parents to come and share their views on the school. We were keen to find out what their views on teaching and learning and the school were. So they felt part of the improvement journey, I think, that they were able to say what was good about the school, what they felt needed further work. And we recorded those strengths and areas of development. And then on a half-termly basis, we would then revisit those areas of improvement with our stakeholders and parents, and to share the progress that we had made. I think the strongest piece of information for parents were the children going home and telling their parents things are changed, things are changing. That's the reassurance. As a parent myself, I can go into a meeting with the head teacher and the leadership team and listen to things. However, my child coming home at the end of the day telling me what it's really like in the school is the most powerful message, and that's the most powerful message in the community as well. Is that when children are telling mum and dad or whoever's looking after them that things are changing in the school, and that was the biggest thing for us.
I think, like you said, the key thing was making them part of the process.
Absolutely,
they're a massive part. They're a key part of that process. We wanted to keep their children in our school, so involving them as much as possible was a key part of the process. And I agree with what you said. The children going home and telling their parents, this is what's happening, this is what's changing in school, this is what we're doing now. And the things we were sharing as well with the parents that perhaps they hadn't seen before. Regular communication, like I said, weekly newsletters, they hadn't had those before. Just sharing information gave parents that confidence that actually, things are changing and we're going to wait and see what happens.
I think, when you go into a category such as special measures, it can be a little bit of breakdown in trust maybe between the school and parents. And it's about re-establishing those relationships. And they can only be done with being brutally honest with the parents, saying, look, this is where we really are. But these are our plans, and you will see changes shortly. And that trust then has to develop over time where they do actually see those improvements taking place. But you have to have that honesty, otherwise the relationship is broken.
To give you a hypothetical question, then, if you had a colleague who had just been taken on a school in special measures and appointed to the headship, is there one piece of particular advice you'd give them?
Yeah, embrace it. Be honest with the inspection team. The post-inspection action plan, I've actually taken what we discussed in Crumlin back to my other school as well about taking things out. School improvement planning now in Rooster David has got 3 targets, 1 per term, which is what we did with the post-inspection action plan in Crumlin. And actually other schools, I've spoken to other schools and they're doing a similar thing as well. So, just be honest, embrace it. It's a fantastic journey. I know that sounds strange to say, being in special measures, but it really has been a fantastic journey and a really rewarding journey. Seeing the improvements and seeing the changes in staff, seeing their confidence grow and their well-being develop and their morale come back up. That's been a fantastic journey for me. just be honest and embrace it, enjoy it.
My advice would be, if you have the opportunity to lead a school in special measures, embrace it, as you said. I was a head teacher for 13 years. I learnt so much in that first year of leading a school that was in special measures than I had in previous X amount of years. It was a really rewarding experience to see real, genuine, rapid school improvement as well. And there's nothing more rewarding for us as teachers and educators to see children making that progress as a result of a massive team effort, which Estyn, the local authority, the region, are part of, and the parents and the community. It's so rewarding. So if you have the opportunity to do it, I would 100% recommend it. It can be challenging. It can be brutal. It can be one step forward, a couple of steps back. The pace of change may not be as rapid as you'd like at times, but the journey is definitely worth it. And the team building ethos that comes about as a result of that is like gold dust, really. And
it can be quite an emotional process as well, particularly when the school is removed. Did you find that?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, for me, the professional learning for myself was fantastic. I'd do it again tomorrow if I had the opportunity. If someone asked me to do it, I'd quite like to do it again tomorrow, because the reward you got at the end when you came out of special measures, and staff cried. As soon as I told them that we were out, they cried. And for me, that was a massive reward, just to see the journey they'd been on from where they were a few months sooner on the floor to suddenly, crying happy tears. That was a massive reward.
I think you're right about the professional learning. In the days before I became an HMI, I went to a school in special measures over the border in England, actually, as a deputy head. And the 3 years I was there, I probably learnt more about leadership than all the rest of the time I was a senior leader in school as well. It is a big learning process, isn't it? David, did you find it emotional moment?
I did. I'm not an emotional sort of person, really. I've been teaching for 36 years, but when I was given the information that we are finally, I'm getting a bit emotional now, that we're removing you from special measures, you have this overwhelming sort of sense of warmth, and your head tingles, and you think, well, we've achieved. However, that is just the start of the journey.
Well, I was coming and ask you about this, because obviously after you came out of special measures, Greenhill had another core inspection a couple of years later. And I know from my own experience that actually just after you've come out of a statutory category, it can be quite a challenging time for a school, because it's, lots of things that you've got staff into routines of doing. People can feel like they can take the foot off the gas a little bit, so to speak. So did you find it a challenge, Craig, in your school?
I guess being a smaller school, perhaps not as much, but it was just about keeping that momentum going, really. Staff, like I said, they worked so hard. They were working incredibly hard before. They worked so hard to get out of special measures. They did a great staff, but they've kept going. Now, like I said, they are sharing their expertise with other schools. Within local authority, we've got people coming in to see literacy. We're sharing our numeracy journey with other schools as well. So it's been really rewarding just to see them keep going. And like you said, there is that danger of taking, just speed camera analogy, you go past the speed camera, you slow down, you speed back up again. I guess that could happen after inspection as well. But staff have really kept working really, really hard. They're still working incredibly hard at the moment. Monitoring goes on, in a smaller school daily basis. I call out classes, I look at books on a daily basis when I'm there. So yeah, it is a danger, I guess, that when you come out of a category, because staff have worked so hard, there's that danger of slowing down and going back a little bit. But
sorry, David, but just to say, in the case of Greenhill, anybody who goes on the Estyn website has a look at your most recent inspection report, which was, as I say, a couple of years after coming out, will be able to see it's a very positive report, and you obviously were, as a school, able to keep the momentum of improvement. What would you say were the key factors in how you managed to do that?
I was worried about that. Let's go back to old practices when you come out of special measures. But because you've been on that journey where the monitoring visits are happening on a regular basis, the governing body subcommittees are set up, the structure is set up, the layers of improving the quality of teaching and learning are set up, the professional learning program becomes embedded. Those building blocks of becoming a good school are firmly embedded. So that has just continued then, Steve, even beyond 2024 with the last Estyn inspection. The culture now at Greenhill is such that it'll never go back to those ways, because the middle leaders are able to drive improvement within the quality of teaching and learning and people's skills. And I think you're always, as a geographer, looking at the next strata of layer of improvement. And as you improve, you may be at the start looking at, as we call it, the Greenhill Five, a structure of consistency in lessons. And now you're looking at mentoring programs of teaching. You just continue to build the next layer on in terms of school improvement until you get to your final goal, which is part of the vision at the beginning. It is a brave thing to say in the stage in front of a group of 90 people, staff that you've met for the first time. Within 5 years, we will be placed among the best schools in Wales. And that's our ambition, because our children deserve it. But if you set out with that goal at the start, and you use the Estyn team and the recommendations and those monitoring visits to help you get there, when you come out of a category, whether the Estyn whether you have another core visit or you just continue on the improvement journey, those systems and structures are in place, and hopefully that scaffold will enable you to continue on that journey.
Well, it's like you said before, David, about things being embedded, and one of the things that an inspection or a monitoring team is looking for is whether the improvements that have been put in place are sustainable. Right. And it comes back to what we were talking about before, does it, about not doing things for the monitoring team, not doing things for Estyn. It's about doing sustainable things that will keep the journey of improvement going, because no school is the finished article. There's a lot of myths around where you have to be and what you have to have done to come out of a category, but it's about, as I say, having that trajectory and sustainability of the improvement going forward. Okay, well, to sum up then, if you like, I think some of the things that we've covered, the important things to remember on an improvement journey and follow-up are about stripping things back, focusing on what's really important, particularly around teaching and learning. It's about making your staff feel part of a team effort, and doing things that are all about school improvement and not for any perceived audience, whether it's Estyn or the local authority. Is that a fair summary, would you say, or is there anything else you would add to that?
Yeah, I think the only thing I would add is, even school and special measures, there are still elements of excellence in that school. It's about identifying those as well and making sure staff are aware of those and being able to share those with others as well. Like you said, stripping things back, most definitely being open and honest, but don't forget there are still those areas of good practice in the school as well, and celebrate those as the staff as well, as saying this is what we have to do to improve. And
you mentioned the word celebrate there. So celebrate those small wins, remain positive, celebrate success with the pupils on a regular basis with the staff, and you see it as being a positive experience to instigate change in your school and embrace it.
Okay, well, thank you both. Thank you very much for coming on and discussing follow-up. And if anybody is interested in finding out more about Estyn's work with follow-up, there are lots of improvement resources on our website, and there's always each year in the annual report a summary of our work with schools in follow-up. So that's it. Thank you. Thank you both very much.
Thank you.